On August 16, 2026, Hayden Panettiere died at just 36 years old. The news came suddenly, and almost immediately, one question began spreading everywhere. What happened? Her representative confirmed her death, and her family expressed their grief. Authorities are reportedly investigating the circumstances, which means there is still a line between what is known and what remains unanswered. That uncertainty makes the story especially difficult to understand. Because Hayden Panettiere was not someone who disappeared from public life without a history. Her life had been documented for decades. She had grown up in front of cameras, experienced extraordinary fame while still young, built a successful career in television and film, became a mother, struggled publicly with addiction and depression, and spent years trying to rebuild parts of her life that had fallen apart. And now, at only 36, her story has ended in circumstances that are still being investigated. To understand the questions surrounding her death, it is important to go back much further than the final days of her life. Hayden Leslie Panettiere was born on August 21, 1989, in Palisades, New York. She entered entertainment extraordinarily young. Before she was even a year old, she was appearing in commercials. By childhood, acting had become a serious part of her life. She appeared on television in productions including One Life to Live and Guiding Light, learning the strange routine of growing up while adults around her worked in an industry built around schedules, auditions, cameras, and public attention. She also began building a film career. One of her early recognizable performances came in Remember the Titans, where she played Cheryl Yost. She later appeared in projects including Joe Somebody, Ice Princess, Bring It On, All or Nothing, and the Scream franchise. But none of those roles prepared the world for what happened in 2006. At 17, Panettiere became Claire Bennett on NBC's Heroes. Claire was a teenage cheerleader with an extraordinary ability. She could heal herself. The character became one of the defining faces of the series, and Panettiere became internationally recognizable almost overnight. The irony was difficult to miss. Millions of people watched her play a young woman who could survive almost anything. Behind that fictional character was a real teenager trying to navigate the pressure of becoming famous. Panettiere was suddenly dealing with the demands that come with being a young Hollywood star. Interviews, publicity, expectations, work, money, and the constant awareness that millions of strangers were watching. Her success continued when she took on another major role. In 2012, she became Juliet Barnes on Nashville, a country singer whose personal life was often as complicated as her career. Panettiere did more than act in the series. She also sang, recording music connected to the show and establishing herself as a performer beyond traditional acting. Her performance earned 2 Golden Globe nominations, and Nashville became one of the most important professional chapters of her adult life. But there was another reason the role became significant. As the years passed, the boundaries between Panettiere's public struggles and the difficult emotional world of Juliet Barnes sometimes seemed uncomfortably close. The actress was no longer simply portraying complicated problems on television. She was living through serious problems of her own. Her relationship with Ukrainian heavyweight boxer Vladimir Klitschko became a major part of her personal life. The couple welcomed their daughter, Kaya, in 2014. Motherhood, however, came during one of the hardest periods of Panettiere's life. She later spoke openly about experiencing postpartum depression after Kaya's birth. She also discussed alcohol addiction and periods in which her substance use became deeply destructive. These were not rumors created after her death. Panettiere herself publicly discussed these struggles, including treatment and recovery. Her experiences eventually became part of the story she wanted to tell in her own words. Her relationship with Kaya also became complicated by those struggles. In 2018, Panettiere agreed to give full custody of Kaya to Klitschko. Public discussion of the decision often reduced it to a simple headline, but Panettiere later explained that she believed her daughter would be safer and better cared for while she concentrated on getting herself healthy. That decision did not mean she stopped loving her daughter. In fact, in later interviews and in her 2026 memoir, Panettiere continued to describe Kaya as one of the most important people in her life. There were other painful chapters. Her relationship with Brian Hickerson later became the subject of public attention and legal controversy, and Panettiere eventually spoke about experiencing an abusive relationship. Again, these experiences became part of a much larger pattern. A woman who had been famous since childhood trying to regain control over her life while her private struggles repeatedly became public. Then came another devastating loss. In 2023, her younger brother, actor Jansen Panettiere, died at the age of 28. His death deeply affected Hayden. The loss came after years in which she had already been dealing with addiction, depression, complicated relationships, and the challenge of rebuilding her career. And yet, she kept trying. She returned to acting. She appeared in the Scream franchise and continued taking professional opportunities. She also remained connected to fans who had followed her since Heroes. In 2026, she published her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning, offering a far more personal account of the life behind the celebrity image. The book discussed childhood fame, addiction, postpartum depression, relationships, motherhood, and the painful experiences she had carried for years. That timing now makes her death even harder to process. Only weeks before her passing, Panettiere was still publicly engaging with the world. Her final Instagram post, published July 27th, showed her smiling with photographer Randall Slavin and carried the simple caption, "Good times and good friends." There was no public announcement that she was preparing to leave the spotlight. There was only the sudden loss of a woman who had spent nearly her entire life in front of the public. Hayden Panettiere's story had always contained two versions of the same person: the actress millions recognized, and the woman struggling to find stability away from the cameras. The first version was famous. The second was far more complicated. And despite everything she had survived, the most difficult chapter of her life may have been the one nobody saw coming. The most difficult chapter of Hayden Panettiere's life was not simply about losing fame. It was about trying to regain control of a life that had become increasingly difficult to manage. By the later years of her life, Hayden was no longer the teenage star of Heroes. She was a woman trying to rebuild after addiction, depression, postpartum depression, painful relationships, and years of intense public scrutiny. And she was becoming increasingly willing to talk about those experiences herself. In May 2026, she released her memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning. The book became one of the clearest windows into what she had experienced away from television screens. She discussed growing up famous, her struggles with alcohol, depression, motherhood, relationships, and the loss of her younger brother, Jansen. The memoir also reached number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list. For Hayden, speaking publicly about those experiences appeared to be part of rebuilding her identity. She had spent much of her childhood being seen by millions of people. Now, she was trying to make sure people understood what they had not seen. Her story about motherhood was particularly painful. Hayden gave birth to Kaya in 2014. But the period surrounding motherhood became intertwined with severe postpartum depression and alcohol addiction. She later described how those problems affected her ability to function, and eventually contributed to her decision to give Vladimir Klitschko full custody of their daughter in 2018. It was one of the most misunderstood parts of her life. Hayden later pushed back against the idea that she had simply abandoned her child. She described Kaya as her greatest gift and explained that giving custody to her father was a decision she believed was necessary while she worked on getting healthy. Even while they lived apart, Hayden continued to speak about her relationship with Kaya. She remained emotionally connected to her daughter and spoke proudly about her interests, personality, and development. That relationship remained important to Hayden until the final period of her life. But another loss had permanently changed her. In February 2023, her younger brother Jansen died at just 28. His death was later attributed to an enlarged heart and aortic valve complications. Hayden had been close to him, and the loss became another devastating event in a life already marked by difficult transitions. Still, Hayden continued moving forward professionally. She returned to the Scream franchise as Kirby Reed, reconnecting with a character she had first played more than a decade earlier. She also remained involved in new projects. Her 2026 psychological thriller Sleepwalker became one of her final screen appearances, meaning she was still working and appearing professionally in the year she died. There was also a noticeable change in how she presented herself publicly. Instead of allowing old headlines to define her, Hayden was increasingly telling her own story. The memoir became part of that process. Interviews surrounding the book brought her back into the public conversation, not simply as the former star of Heroes and Nashville, but as someone openly discussing addiction, depression, motherhood, and recovery. Then came July. On July 27th, Hayden posted a photograph on Instagram showing herself smiling beside photographer Randall Slavin. The caption read, "Good times and good friends." It would become her final publicly documented Instagram post. Nothing about that post publicly suggested that her life was about to end. That is important because it is tempting, after a sudden death, to look backward and turn ordinary moments into supposed clues. But a photograph of someone smiling does not tell us what was happening privately. And neither do old struggles automatically explain a person's death. That distinction matters enormously in Hayden Panettiere's case. On August 16, 2026, news broke that she had died. She was only days away from her 37th birthday. Her representative confirmed the death, and her family asked for privacy as they dealt with the loss. Her father, Skip Panettiere, described Hayden as an extraordinary presence who had brought love and joy to people around her. But the first reports left out the most important detail. There was no official cause of death. And there still isn't one at the time of writing. Reuters reported that her family confirmed her death through her publicist and that no cause had been disclosed because the circumstances were under investigation. That means some of the stories appearing online need to be treated carefully. There have been reports about law enforcement responding to an incident involving Hayden, and TMZ reported that authorities were conducting an open investigation. The same report also cited a source close to Hayden who said she had complained of back pain during the previous year. But those details do not establish a cause of death. They do not prove an overdose. They do not prove suicide. They do not prove homicide. They do not prove an accident. And they do not prove that any previous health, addiction, or mental health struggle caused her death. Those are separate questions, and investigators would have to establish any connection through evidence. This is where the story becomes uncomfortable. Hayden had openly discussed addiction. She had discussed depression. She had gone through postpartum depression. She had experienced traumatic personal events. She had lost her brother. She had struggled with relationships. All of those facts are documented parts of her biography, but none of them by themselves tell us why she died on August 16th. That answer remains unknown. And perhaps the most important thing about this investigation is what has not been said. No official medical cause had been released. No verified statement from authorities had established the circumstances. No credible source had publicly provided evidence proving one specific explanation. So the mystery cannot responsibly be filled with speculation. For years, Hayden's private struggles were often turned into public headlines. Now, after her death, there is a risk of doing the same thing again, taking the hardest moments of her past and using them to construct an explanation that has not been established. That would be unfair to the facts, and unfair to Hayden. There is also another reason the final months of her life deserve attention. She was not simply disappearing. She was working. She was promoting her memoir. She was speaking about her experiences. She was reconnecting with audiences. She had recently appeared publicly and continued to maintain a professional presence. In other words, the final period of Hayden Panettiere's life was not publicly presented as a final goodbye. It looked, at least from the outside, like another attempt to move forward. And then everything stopped. The investigation now has to answer questions that the public cannot answer from photographs, interviews, or old headlines. What happened in the hours before her death? What did authorities find? What will medical examination reveal? Will an official cause of death eventually be announced? And will the evidence connect her death to any known aspect of her past, or show that the answer was something nobody publicly anticipated? At this moment, there is only one responsible conclusion. Hayden Panettiere died at 36. Her death has been confirmed. Authorities are reportedly investigating, and the official cause remains undisclosed. Everything beyond that must wait for evidence. And that uncertainty is where Hayden's story now reaches its most difficult point. Because before the world can understand how she died, it has to confront the more complicated question of how she lived, and what she managed to accomplish despite everything that happened along the way. What actually happened to Hayden Panettiere? That is the question that remains at the center of her death. As of August 17, 2026, the confirmed facts are limited. There are already countless theories circulating online, but theories are not evidence. Hayden had previously spoken about alcoholism, addiction, depression, and postpartum depression. Those struggles are documented parts of her life, including in her 2026 memoir, This Is Me, A Reckoning. But there is currently no official statement establishing that any of those struggles caused or contributed to her death. Until authorities or medical officials release verified findings, those possibilities remain speculation. And that is perhaps the most important point to make about Hayden's death. Her past cannot automatically become an explanation for her death. For years, the public watched her struggle. They watched her speak about recovery. They watched her return to work. And financially, that career had generated substantial earnings over the years. Panettiere's income came primarily from acting, particularly television. Heroes made her a major young star, while Nashville gave her a long-running role that also allowed her to earn money from music. She recorded songs for the series and achieved recognition as a singer in addition to acting. She also earned from film projects, including the Scream franchise and other productions, as well as voice work, endorsements, and other entertainment opportunities. But when it comes to her net worth, there is an important problem. There is no publicly verified financial statement showing exactly how much Hayden Panettiere was worth when she died. Different celebrity finance publications have published very different estimates. The Street reported in June 2026 that estimates ranged between approximately $12 million and $15 million. These estimates can include assumptions about past salaries, residual income, property, investments, and other assets. They generally do not provide the kind of complete financial documentation that would be necessary to establish an exact personal fortune. Her financial story also reflects the unusual nature of her career. She started earning money from entertainment when she was still an infant. She became a household name as a teenager. Then Heroes transformed her earning power. Nashville gave her another major television platform and allowed her to expand into music. And even after periods away from Hollywood, she was still able to return to recognizable franchises. That is not the story of someone whose career simply disappeared. It is the story of someone whose career became increasingly uneven because her personal life was becoming more difficult. And that may be one of the saddest contradictions in Hayden's story. She had achieved the kind of fame many actors spend their entire lives chasing. But fame could not protect her from depression. It could not protect her from addiction. It could not protect her from grief. It could not prevent her from experiencing the pain of being separated from her daughter. And it could not protect her from the loss of her brother. Her public life and private life were often moving in completely different directions. On screen, she could be the indestructible Claire Bennett. On Nashville, she could portray Juliette Barnes, a talented woman battling personal demons while trying to remain successful. Off-screen, Hayden was trying to survive problems that were far more complicated than any television storyline. Yet there was another side to those struggles. She eventually became willing to talk about them. That matters. Hayden did not have to discuss postpartum depression publicly. She did not have to describe addiction. She did not have to talk about rehab, motherhood, relationships, or the decisions surrounding her daughter's custody. But she did. And by the final year of her life, she had turned many of those experiences into a memoir. Her public discussions also gave people facing similar problems someone to identify with. She was not presenting herself as someone who had figured everything out. She was describing what it was like to struggle and attempt to recover. That is a very different kind of public image from the one she had as a teenager. And perhaps that is the version of Hayden Panettiere that deserves the most attention now. Not the child star. Not the celebrity headline. Not the speculation surrounding her death. But the person who spent years trying to rebuild herself. Hayden was a performer who had lived almost her entire life in public. She entered the entertainment business before she was old enough to understand what celebrity meant. She became internationally famous as a teenager. She became a television star, a film actress, and a singer. She became a mother. She experienced addiction and depression. She went through recovery. She suffered the devastating loss of her younger brother. She returned to work. And shortly before her death, she was still telling her own story. Her daughter Kaya survives her, as do her parents. Kaya has continued living with her father, Vladimir Klitschko. For Kaya, the loss is not a headline. It is the loss of her mother. And that makes the remaining unanswered questions even more painful. What happened during Hayden's final hours? What will investigators ultimately determine? Will an official cause of death be released? Will the medical findings provide an explanation? Or will some questions remain unanswered even after the investigation is complete? At this moment, nobody outside those directly involved can responsibly answer them. And perhaps that uncertainty should remain part of the story until facts replace speculation. Hayden Panettiere's life was much more complicated than the image audiences first saw on television. She was a child performer who became an international star. She was Claire Bennett. She was Juliette Barnes. She was Kirby Reed. She was a singer. She was a daughter. She was a sister. She was a mother. And she was a woman who openly admitted that she had struggled. Her career cannot be reduced to her final years. And her final years cannot be reduced to her struggles. Most importantly, her death should not erase everything that came before it. At 36, Hayden Panettiere's life ended far earlier than anyone expected.